Hi folks, how's all doing? Well, what have I got here? This is a Replica Railways Hall class locomotive. It's the Lady Margaret Hall, and it's a very nice looking thing. This was sent to me not to repair actually, just to give it a little bit of a service and a check over. So let's just see how it runs. So it seems to run absolutely fine. I've only ever seen one Replica Railways locomotive before, and that was something I bought off eBay. It didn't make it to video. It might do yet, actually, but I'll talk about that when I get this to the bench. Alright, let's get to it and have a look at it. Okay, so Replica Railways. Yeah, I bought, just before we look at this, I bought a Replica Railways V1 off eBay, and you know, I thought it was going to be a nice little video to do, do the usual thing, do the repair and have a look at it. But they are a little bit different from mainline, not hugely different, because I think anyway Replica Railways took over mainline, then Bachmann took them over, I'm not sure. But this was the chassis for the B1, and it has a little self-contained motor, which I thought, well, that's a little bit better than the mainline ones. But this thing wouldn't really go, it just sort of went, and I got it going, but it was quite clear the gears were slipping, and the motor makes one hell of a racket. On its own, I can just put a battery on this. On its own it's not too bad, but as soon as you put any load on the gear, you can hear it. That's the noise you get, amplified hugely through the chassis. So this thing, when it was running, just screamed. I suspect that it's the bearings of the motor. So when it's under load, I think these bearings are just making a hell of a racket. I took this apart, I greased it, I've oiled it, I've filed the gears, but the gears are slipping, and actually when you look at them, the tops are all worn off the top. So really what I need to get this going is a new set of gears, and I think a new motor. And I can possibly pick up a motor off eBay, but I can't find gears anywhere. So if anybody out there has replacement gears for one of these and a replacement motor, I'd be very, very interested. So pop me an email. Anyway, maybe one day that B1 will run, because it's a nice thing. But let's look at this Hall class. So the fact that this is running really, really well kind of spooked me a bit, because I thought, look, I know what's inside this. If it's anything like the B1, I'll find out in a minute, but if it's anything like the B1, I really don't want to start taking it to bits when it's running okay. There's far too much danger of just upsetting it that little bit, and it could start screaming the way my B1 did. So I don't want to risk that. So I've told the owner, look, you know, sometimes you're best just to leave things alone. But we'll have a look at it to see if it's really dirty. You know, if it's in a mess, then that's maybe a different story. But we'll have a look at this and see what sort of condition it's in, and we'll check the axles, because again, if this is like the B1, it's got the old split axle nonsense, and that could be, well, there could be a story to tell. But let's see. Oh, it's a little bit different. Well, it's got the same motor as my B1 and the same gears. But yeah, a slight difference in the chassis. You could just compare the chassis styles there. Right, like that. So this has got a separate part. That's interesting. We'll get these on, and I'm going to have a really, really close look. The springs are nice and clean, and I can just see the commutator, and I can see shiny copper, so it's not massively dirty. Okay, so looking at the motor, everything looks nice and clean. To get the motor out to service it, you'd have to take the two halves of the chassis apart. So you've got to take the wheels off, take the two halves of the chassis apart, get this motor out, open it up. You know, there's screws there that hold the brush clips in place, and there's two tiny, tiny wee screws there and there. Take them out, and you can get into the motor and clean it up. Put all that together. It's not hugely difficult to do, but because of what happened to my B1, I just don't want to do it. I really, really don't. I think there's far too much risk of it going back together and making some sort of horrible noise. And that would be a shame, because this is running, you know, otherwise really nicely for a split chassis locomotive anyway. So I'm just going to take this under frame off and we'll get a look at the axles. I think the owner did say there was a problem with the screws, but they're fine. And that just comes off. And again, it's pretty much the same as any mainline locomotive. You've got the nylon axles and the drive gear on that one. And again, on my B1, the drive gear was actually quite soft and flimsy. There's a lot of carpet fibres in here, so we'll clean all that out. So yeah, this does just look to be in much better condition than my B1. And it's not been over lubricated. Oh, there is a split in the axle. There's a split in the middle axle, so we'll get some super glue in there. So it's not a completely pointless exercise in looking at this. I was a little bit worried when I put this on the track and ran it. I thought, there's nothing to do here. It runs fine. Where's my tweezers? There they are. Okay, so we'll have a pick out, because we've got lots of fluff to get rid of. And this also has, as the B1 does, I don't know if you can see there, but there's little springs in the chassis for the middle axle. Not quite sure what that's about. I think it's just to try and improve electrical pickup, I think. But not a bad idea actually. Just keeping that middle wheel in contact with the track. Right, now this is the one that's got a lot of fluff in it. So it's cracked on that side, just on that side. So we'll get some super glue in there, and hopefully that's going to keep this running for a little while. We'll degrease it. So one thing I haven't mentioned is that these Replica Railways models have traction tyres on the rear wheel. I think that's a bad idea. Maybe when they were running them, they were finding that, you know, wheels were slipping if they were pulling lots of coaches. But to me, all that's doing is reducing, you know, electrical pickup to the front and the middle wheels, which isn't ideal. I mean, it probably runs okay, but I would much rather not have those traction tyres. Bit of super glue in this crack. Boom, that'll do it. So ideally, we really should be replacing this axle, but you know, it's quite a bit of work to do that. Don't want that one. Just work the super glue into the crack a bit. I'm going to let that dry, and then I'll repeat that. At least this one, the wheels are flush. I'll just show you on my B1, and I was really surprised to see this. I'll show you in the front axle here. The wheels are actually slightly concave. You know, the hubs stick out a little bit. And initially, the crank pins were pushed right in, so the connecting rod was actually rubbing against the middle of the wheel as it was going round. So I pulled the crank pins out a wee bit, and that's freed it all up. And that actually made it run, but the noise was horrendous, and as I say, as soon as you put it around a corner, the gears started slipping. So it's, yeah, the gears are done. It's kind of a lost cause unless I can get those replacements. and hopefully that'll give that a little bit of a longer life. But they are time bombs, these things. I've said it before. These axles are just rubbish, so I would stay clear of them, especially off eBay. I just wouldn't touch them. The B1 I bought is a bit of a punt. I got it very, very cheap, and I wanted a B1, and I saw this one going really, really cheap. So I wasn't too fussed about it not working. But yeah, so far the B1 has defeated me. Okay, so I'm just going to put a little bit of gear oil into there, just to help lubricate the gears a bit. Ideally, I really want to get in there and grease everything, but I ain't opening this up. Right, and we shall pop some lighter oil into this bearing. 1, 2, and then pop this underframe back on. And then we'll give this a wee test. Seems to run okay. We shall pop this on. And there we go, that's the Lady Margaret Hall given a clean bill of health. Let's go and stick on the track. So one thing this locomotive maybe doesn't do particularly well is pull away very slowly. It needs a bit of power to get it to go. Like that. Otherwise it runs really nice. So there we are, that's this Replica Railways Lady Margaret Hall running fine. It was running fine to begin with, so I didn't have to do very much. Just a tiny wee repair to the axle and a bit of a clean up, a bit of light oil, and it's running absolutely fine. And hopefully it'll do so for a while yet. Again, if you have any spare parts for my Class B1, the gears and motor, please get in touch, because I'd love to get that running. And if I could get it running as quietly and smoothly as this thing, I'd be really, really chuffed. Alright, okay, catch you later folks.